All right, so nobody here really knows me. I'm Doc. I am the medical director for ACAC. I work at Legacy Management and cover medical programming for all of our clubs. That's a 2-day-a-week stint. The other 3 days a week, I'm an orthopedic surgeon for Centara Martha Jefferson in Charlottesville, and I do some administrative stuff there. Chairman of the hospital board there, and my job at ACAC is really to try and help ACAC lead fitness into the healthcare continuum. That's why I'm here, because I have a foot in both worlds. I am a certified personal trainer, and I'm a certified medical exercise specialist through the American Council on Exercise. I've been in fitness for a long time. I've been in healthcare for 30 years, and so that's really why they hired me, was not just for our programming, but to really sort of try to bridge the gap between those two industries. I currently sit on the board of directors for the American Council on Exercise, and that's part of the reason we have, well, I should say part of the reason we have partnered with them is because we really liked their approach toward moving into healthcare. And as a result of that partnership, I have partnered with them and moved up to the point where I'm on the board of directors there. So that's me, that's who I am. What we're going to talk about today is the Inbody. And I will tell you, our club in Germantown, for instance, has been using the Inbody for years. And, I walked in to give this talk, and I stared at the sea of faces all sort of sitting there going, yeah, okay, what are you going to tell me? I've done this for 3 years. The Inbody is like an iPhone, okay? We buy it because of all the things it can do for us, and we use about 4 or 5 of those things, okay? The Inbody has a tremendous amount of information, and very frequently what it boils down to when we sit down, and I'm going to refer to our members as patients because in my world they're referred into our system via the healthcare. So when we sit down with our patients and talk about body composition, it often boils down to here's your body fat, here's your visceral fat, here's your muscle, here's what we got to work on. This tool is so much more powerful than that. It is incredibly powerful in terms of your ability to demonstrate to somebody when they are frustrated that they are in fact making tremendous gains. And most importantly for you, not as much for our prep teams, but for personal trainers, this is an incredibly powerful tool to help you design your training program for them. We all know that every good exercise program incorporates the basic components. Should have resistance training, should have cardio, should have flexibility/balance. There's no question. But the reality is different people need different slices of that pie. This tool helps you define where your focus is going to be and where you're going to put their homework. So we're going to talk about body composition, the skinny on, the why, and the how. So the first question is why do it? And it's a question my population asks a lot. You will be asked it at some point, but my population coming through prep, for instance, asks it all the time, and the reason is this. They're sent to us by their doctors because their body weight and their BMI are high. So why do I care about all this stuff? I need to know what my BMI and my body weight are doing, right? Those are the metrics my doctor uses, so why are we worried about this? So those are the most commonly used metrics. So why do we stay away from them and go to body composition? The reason is simple. BMI and weight are horrible. They are horrible measures as relates to a person's health. We'll talk a little later about why they're used, but in reality they are very poor metrics for defining a person's health status. When we talk about BMI and weight, there is no differentiation between a pound of fat and a pound of muscle. When you get people here, we have a situation with body weight and BMI where a sedentary person can lose muscle and gain fat in the early stages and have sort of a null gain in terms of their BMI or even their body weight. Likewise, you can get somebody out here really busting it early on who feels like they aren't making any progress because the scale isn't changing much and their BMI is not changing much, but in point of fact, they're losing fat, gaining muscle, and from a health metric perspective, they are improving significantly. So distribution or ratio of fat to muscle is an infinitely better indicator of health than BMI or weight. Now, this is really key for your new people, because when you get new exercisers, like the ones that come in through my programming, this is a great way to convince them that they are in fact making progress when they're not seeing it based on the scale, or they're not seeing it based on their clothes size. So when we talk about body composition, there's a couple models, two common methods that people talk about. There's the 2C model, or two-component model. In that we measure fat mass and fat-free mass. Pretty simple. The one that's more commonly used is the 4C, or four-component model. We look at body water, which comprises more than 50% of the weight in the average adult. We look at protein, or muscle. We look at mineral, which is essentially bone. And then we look at fat. So there's going to be some common terms throughout this talk. Dry, lean mass. Dry, lean mass is the combination of weight from muscle and bone. Okay, it eliminates water and fat. Lean body mass should not be confused with that, because lean body mass is a combination of dry, lean mass and body water. So the only thing that's eliminated when we talk about lean body mass is fat. Skeletal muscle mass, it's exactly as described. And when we talk about that in terms of mass, we're talking about the dry, lean mass minus bone. Now this is a term I want you to be familiar with, skinny fat. Skinny fat is usually used in reference to morphology. Okay, it's used in reference to aesthetics. The person who doesn't appear overweight, but they got the saggy triceps, they got the soft gut, they don't have much muscle on the leg. So we talk about it aesthetically, but the reality is skinny fat is a term which is critically important metabolically and in terms of a health guide. Skinny fat people are the people that are the most dangerous because they get out of their doctor's office being told they're healthy. Why? Because their weight and their BMI are normal. Okay, these are not people who are morphologically obese, but they have decreased skeletal muscle mass in relation to their body fat. We call these people normal weight but metabolically obese. Metabolically, they are at risk for the same health problems that we see in people who are obese morphologically. So this is a dangerous crowd because they walk around with the misconception that they are healthy. So let's talk about the common message of measurements, because one of the questions you're going to get asked is, why are you guys using Inbody? Because there's lots of different methods. And I'll be the first to tell you there are better methods. But I'll also tell you why we use this one and why it's the best method for us. Calipers. Anybody here been measured with calipers? Okay, good. We're going to go through the pros and cons of each of these. DEXA scan. Too many men and too young for the women to have probably had a DEXA scan. DEXA scan is what we commonly use for bone density. It's how we define osteoporosis. Hydrostatic weighing. Has anybody been dunked? Just one? Okay, we'll talk about that. Air displacement plethysmography, BOD-POD. Anybody been in the BOD-POD? Okay. And then finally, bioelectrical impedance. Now there are a number of bioelectrical impedance devices. Inbody is one of them. We have chosen it for some very specific reasons. So let's take them one by one, talk about the pros and cons. Skin calipers. So pros. Well, it is cheap, no question. And it is easily accessible. One of the things you have to consider when you talk about body composition is footprint. Okay, if you haven't figured it out yet, space in a club is at a premium. And if it isn't being used all the time, it is a waste of dollars and a waste of area that members can be using. So calipers obviously don't take up any space. Now, they're touted, one of the pros is that they are touted as being easy to use. Who here has measured somebody with calipers? Yeah. They're easy to use. Doesn't mean you use them well or get good results. I mean, anybody can pinch, but the reality is they're not easy to use well. Okay? And it is a brief, quick test. All right? Cons. So let's talk about the cons. So when you read about skin calipers, everybody will say experience matters. Would you agree with that? Yeah, I would disagree with it. Because even the most experienced people suck. Okay? And I don't mean the people do, I mean the device does. There have been some good studies where they took experienced people, they had them measure the same person several times over the course of the same day, and the readings were not within a statistical variance. Experience does matter, yes. You get better at it the more you use it, but even when you're good at it, it's not a good device. Accuracy, they say, is questionable. I would say it's not questionable. Accuracy is just bad, okay? Now, they talk about it being physically uncomfortable. You've been squeezed with calipers, right? Did any of you scream in pain, fall to the floor? No. It's not physically painful, but it is an emotional violation. You take my average prepper with a BMI of 39, and on their first day when they gingerly walk into this club scared to death, and then you tell them, I'm going to take this device and I'm going to pinch your fat, you have just violated them, and they will not be back. My wife is a middle-aged woman personal trainer, and her population is, for the most part, 45 to 70-year-old women. And she works at a boutique studio, and they used to use calipers. They now use impedance. But I asked her, I said, when you guys were using calipers, what percentage of your clients actually let you measure them? Now, if they're going to let anybody measure them, it's going to be another middle-aged woman. She said, and I believe she lied, I think she overcalled it, but she said about 50%. So here's the thing, folks. A device does you no good if you can't get data. Even if it was accurate, and it's not. If people aren't going to let you do it, it does you no good. So DEXA scan, okay? Again, most commonly used to define bone density. It is absolutely, without question, the gold standard. This is the best method of obtaining body composition accurately. So pros, it is without question the most accurate. Breaks down composition by body part. It is quick, it is dry, it is painless. It's not degrading. You lay on a table, you don't have to take your clothes off. You're in, you're out. So why don't we use it? Because it's not readily available. They're available in hospital systems, and they're available in hospital systems for a reason. They are incredibly expensive. It requires a prescription to get one. In fact, these aren't even used for research. You would think in research you'd use your best method. If you have a grant for $1 million, you're not going to spend $800,000 of it on a machine. So it is not good for a number of reasons, not the least of which is because the expense is so out of control, you can't repeat the study frequently. And for these to help, you have to be able to get multiple data points to tell what the trends are. So yes, it's great, but not feasible. Hydrostatic weighing, dunking, okay? This is without question, not probably, this is the second most accurate way to measure body composition, okay? Incredibly accurate, doesn't require a medical prescription. It does, however, take up a lot of footprint. Takes up a lot of space in a club. It is expensive, relatively speaking, not prohibitive like a DEXA scan, but it's expensive. And you know, when people haven't been dunked, they sort of get this picture that you put yourself in a bathing suit and you float in a pool and they see how much water you displace. That is not the process, folks. That is not the process. You get in there and you hyperventilate, and then after you hyperventilate, you blow out until you have nothing left, and then they dunk you, okay? None of my preppers are doing that. It's just not feasible, okay? This is one that is commonly used for research because when you're doing research, you're rarely doing it on my preppers. Who you're doing it on? You're doing it on elite athletes. Elite athletes don't mind hyperventilating and getting dunked, okay? So again, incredibly good, but not realistic. The bod pod, air displacement plethysmography. Pros, it is accurate. It is really accurate. This is a great device. This is actually, if you go to UVA's physiology lab, if you're one of the athletes in a study, they're going to dunk you. If you're anybody else, they're going to put you in a bod pod. Okay? Incredibly accurate. And there is no submersion. So when you read about it, it says it's not physically uncomfortable. Garbage. Okay? Until you order MRIs, you don't realize how much of the population is claustrophobic. Most of the population doesn't realize that they are claustrophobic. The bod pod is tight, okay? You are enclosed in a tight space. And again, I want you to flash back to my average prepper who comes in because their BMI is excessive. Not to mention the fact it's expensive, not readily available, takes up a pretty significant footprint, and it really takes up a significant footprint because you have to have it in a separate room. And you have to have it in a separate room because you got to put these people naked in compression clothes or in a bathing suit. So you've got to have it out of your mainstream club. And once again, none of my people are going to jump for this. We had one at Albemarle Square, and I shudder to think how little it was used. Okay? So again, it is a great device. And if you're running a physiology lab and you're dealing with elite athletes, this is a great way to go. For an average club, not reasonable. So let's talk about what we do, which is bioelectrical impedance. And we use the Inbody. Pros. It is affordable. Not for the average small boutique studio. I mean, these are expensive pieces of equipment, but for a club like us, there's absolutely no reason for us not to have one in a facility. It is simple, it is quick, it is painless, they do not need to undress, and with the Inbody link now, we don't even have to worry about HIPAA compliance because nothing's even being printed out and there's no display for people to see. You can put this out in the middle of the club, have people step on it, do their Inbody, and walk off. So from a club perspective, in terms of footprint, ease of use, put it anywhere you want, it's not emotionally violating, no one has to strip down, this is a great device, okay? Now, let's talk about accuracy. Because the criticism of bioelectrical impedance is that the accuracy is not as good as the others. But let's talk about that. Because the accuracy with these can be extremely good. And it's dependent on you, not the machine. Because the key with bioelectrical impedance is that you have to control certain things that will impact the study. And most of that relates to water. So when you do a scan on somebody, you have to know where they are in relation to their last meal. Did they just have a workout? Were their bone dry? Did they just chug a gallon of water? Where are they in their menstrual cycle? Are they retaining water? Because those factors impact the reliability and accuracy of this study. So if I'm a trainer and I'm scheduling people for Inbody, I'm going to have a protocol, okay? It's going to be like your pre-surgery. I'm going to have you, after midnight, I'm just going to have your cup of coffee, something light to drink in the morning. Don't eat breakfast, come in, we'll get you on the Inbody. However you want to do it, because the truth is it doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you do it consistently. Now, when we have our, member magics and our promotional stuff where we say, just come do your Inbody, you can't control any of that. But what you can control is getting that history. Before you put somebody on the Inbody, you ask them, when was your last meal? Did you chug anything before you came? How heavy was your workout? Know where they are in relation to their meal and their hydration status. And then just tell them, every time you do this, you want to simulate this same scenario. If you do that, this is an accurate device. So in summary, why we use Inbody, why we do body composition at all, and why we use Inbody. It's infinitely better than weight and BMI, as we will discuss further. It is not the most accurate point for point, but it is accurate when used appropriately, and most importantly, if you use it consistently, the results are consistent enough for you to tell the trends. And that's really what you're looking for here. We're not in the Olympic training camp. We are looking at whether people are making progress in our training programs or not. We're looking at this to define how we're going to train them. So again, if consistent with the method, it's a great indicator of the trend. So do they have an Inbody in front of them? No? Okay. All right. So when you look at an Inbody scan, you've all looked at them, and I'm going to show you for each of these sections we're going to talk about. The chart is up here. So section 1, body composition analysis. You're measuring intracellular, extracellular, dry lean mass, and body fat mass. So section 1, the intracellular water should stay consistent, okay? Intracellular water only changes dramatically in certain pathologic medical conditions. Frankly, people who have variability of that are probably not working out in your club. So that number is going to stay fairly consistent across the board with your clients regardless. Extracellular water, though, is what you've got to pay attention to. Extracellular water
will fluctuate up or down based on the things we've already discussed. You know, did they dehydrate themselves with a workout? How well did they hydrate? When did they last eat or drink? Where are they in their menstrual cycle? But also in relation to swelling. Now, when we talk about swelling, we talk about two different types, okay? When we talk, edema is swelling, but when we talk about edema, we're usually talking about symmetric swelling. And as we'll see later, the Inbody does give you a side-to-side comparison analysis. So when you see someone who has increased extracellular water, significantly increased extracellular water, and you go later to the side-to-side comparison and it's symmetric, so it's generalized swelling in the body, that is disease state or medication. When somebody has generalized swelling, whatever their disease is, diabetes, hypertension, congestive heart failure, it is not well under control. Or it's a medication issue. They haven't taken their diuretic, they need their meds adjusted. So symmetric bilateral swelling is a bit of a red flag. Now, when you see increased extracellular water, and you've ruled out that it's related to the smoothie or whatever, and you go to the side-to-side comparison later and you see asymmetry, what you've got is inflammation. You essentially have injury. Okay, you've got an extremity that either acutely, subacutely, or chronically has swelling that's asymmetric, so you've got injury. And that is something you need to look at when you start to map out your training. Dry lean mass. Now remember, that's protein, muscle, and mineral, which is bone. So it eliminates water and fat. Now when you look at dry lean mass as you move from study to study, remember, mineral doesn't change quickly. Your bone density doesn't change quickly, again, unless you have a pretty significant pathologic state. So when you see changes in dry lean mass, those reflect skeletal muscle changes, for better or for worse. But what you're seeing when you see that change is a change in skeletal muscle mass. Now, lean body mass. Remember, that's water plus dry lean mass. So this one will mostly reflect muscle change, but you got to look at the extracellular water, okay? If that's staying consistent, if you see a change in this, then it's a change in muscle. But this is where the water can throw you off. Again, for better or for worse. Now, an important thing here, when you read body fat mass here, and when you talk to your clients or patients about their body fat, I want you to understand a really important concept, and that is all fat is not created equal. Okay, the only good fat in our body is brown fat, and we have relatively little of that. The bad fat in our body is divided into visceral fat and subcutaneous fat. You have heard the old adage, it's better to have a pear shape than an apple shape. It's better to carry your weight below the waist than above the waist. Better to have the big hips and big thighs and small torso than to have the barrel torso and the skinny legs. And the reason for that is all the fat below the waist is subcutaneous fat. While that is not good fat, and while it still predisposes you to certain health issues, it is infinitely better than visceral fat. And the way to solidify this in your mind is this. Your viscera are your bodily organs, okay? Your intestines, your gut, your liver, your kidneys, your heart. So visceral fat is the fat that you should think of as literally encasing those organs and squeezing them, okay? Visceral fat is the heart killer. Visceral fat is the liver killer. So we're going to see later one of the important metrics that you're going to measure and look at is visceral fat. So, this next one, extracellular water to total body water. This is easy. It's a single number, single range. That acceptable range is 0.36 to 0.39. If you have greater than 0.39, you likely have inflammation. Either generalized swelling, again related to disease state or medication, or unilateral asymmetric swelling, which is usually related to extremity injury. Minor fluctuations are normal, but again, a lot of that's related to how good you are with being consistent on how you measure. and those fluctuations should still stay close to or within that range. So, remember, lean body mass includes dry lean mass, so muscle and bone, but it also includes water. So if you have high lean body mass, I told you that generally is going to reflect skeletal muscle if there's a change, not if you have excess water. All right. In every talk you will ever receive in your life, there are going to be a couple of takeaway points. Okay? If good studies have been shown to show that, or have been done to show that on average you retain 2 or 3 real take-homes out of every hour lecture you get. So wake up for the next few minutes because this is take-home number 1. Okay? If you can only pick one section of the Inbody to help you define whether a person is making progress or regressing, if you can only pick one area of the Inbody to help you map out their training, this is it. Okay? The muscle fat analysis. Now, when you look at this, I want you to think of this graphically. You got your body weight, your skeletal muscle mass, your body fat mass. And then at the top, you have your scale. Okay? So this is going to give us a great snapshot of their overall body composition. Literally, it's going to give us a picture. Okay? I can look at this without seeing your client and tell you their body type. I can tell you what they look like. Can't tell you their hair color or eye color, but I can tell you what their body looks like. So when you look at the measurements, this 100% on the top of the graph, that mark is based on same height and gender norms. Now, a trainer in Charlottesville asked a great question, and that is that the norm in the population? And the answer is no. The norm in the population is obese. I mean, 40%, 42% of our population is obese now. These are norms calculated from ideal body composition. Okay? So that 100% is based on same height and same gender norms. We're looking at total body weight. We're looking at literally skeletal muscle mass. And then we're looking at body fat mass, which again does not differentiate visceral from subcutaneous. All right? And what we're going to do is we are going to connect these dots vertically. And when we do that, it's going to create a letter. And that's going to give us our snapshot. 3 basic body types. If you think back to high school, okay, high school science. I don't know, maybe they don't teach that anymore. It's a long time ago for me. But you have your ectomorph, your endomorph, and your mesomorph. You have your skinny, your fat, and your muscular builds. Those are morphologic. Those are visual body types. This is going to tell you what those types are without having to see the client. There are 3 basic types, and we're going to get them by connecting those endpoints vertically. This is what is going to help you tailor your training program. This is what's going to help you define whether they need to focus on cardio and fat loss or whether they need to focus on skeletal muscle development. Now, yes, they need to focus on all of it, but let's be real, you've got to put an emphasis somewhere, and this is what's going to help you define that, okay? So it's going to tell you, do I focus on fat loss, muscle gain? And again, we want that rather than weight change. Get weight change out of your vernacular and out of your vocabulary. This is about changing body composition, okay? So the first body type we're going to look at is the C shape, okay? So I've got weight here, skeletal muscle mass here, body fat mass here. What's that person going to look like? They've got low skeletal muscle mass in relation to their weight, and they have high body fat. What are they going to look like? It's not a trick question. You don't have to be afraid. What would you say they're going to look like?
Small, chubby.
Chubby. Okay. If this D is here, and I have an I that's right here, which one's healthier? Do I want 160% of the norm in body fat? Even if I have 190% in skeletal muscle mass? No. All of you in this room are too young to remember somebody named Vasily Alexiev. Vasily Alexiev won more Olympic medals than Michael Phelps will ever dream of. He was a Soviet lifter during the era of Soviet domination, and he was a super heavyweight power lifter. The man was a monument. He also weighed about 460 pounds. And most of it was here, because as a bodybuilder, that's where you carry it. You don't carry any fat in your legs or your arms. It's all visceral fat. You need that kind of weight to move the hundreds of pounds that he moved. So, he was a D. He was a D that was up here. With that kind of visceral body fat and that kind of body fat up in here, he was every bit as much at risk for adult onset diabetes as somebody who has more fat, less muscle, but lower down on the scale. So yes, he has great muscle mass. But again, you have to think of it in relation to where it is on the scale. So if I'm working with Vasily Alexiev, it's only one focus. And he's going to lose some muscle mass. Okay? That's just the reality. He's going to lose some muscle mass. I will take that if I can really shift his body fat. Now, in the perfect world, what letter would you want? You'd want an isosceles triangle. You'd want a V with a closed loop, right? You'd like this puppy to be down somewhere in here, and you'd like this puppy to be out in here, okay? So when you are thinking about your training, you're going to think about two things. You're going to think about where they are in relation to that vertical, and then you're going to think about what you can do to maximize that skeletal muscle mass in relation to the weight. So which needle do you need to move? Okay? Make sense? So that vertical D at 120%, that's not terrible. You know, if I got somebody in here, they're probably a linebacker or a lineman, not a running back, but they're probably in good shape. But if I'm going to focus as a trainer on something, I'm going to focus on fat loss, right? I'm going to extend that D. If my vertical's at 75%, my skeletal muscle mass is inadequate. Body fat's good, leave that. If I gain skeletal muscle mass, what else do I gain? I gain weight. So I'm going to move out toward a normal weight as my skeletal muscle mass increases. So that is probably the most important part of this talk. So if there's questions about that, stop me now. Did that make sense? Always think of it in terms of the vertical, and always think of it in terms of where's my focus going to be? Fat loss, muscle gain. Okay? All right, so when you look at the obesity analysis, and I'll ask you the question, and if no one answers it, it's okay, we're going to come back to it. Is there anything right now, already on this slide, that catches your attention and looks a little funky?
Well, BMI is known about the person's obesity by the percentage of fat.
So you're almost there. Let me ask you a question. What did I tell you in the first slide about BMI? It's lousy. So why do they even have it on this thing? Right? The first time I saw an Inbody report, I was like, what? They had me. They were doing so well. And now they've really irritated me. Why do you put BMI on there? Well, if I'd been smart and done a little more research in their website instead of just picking up the phone and calling, I'd have found the answer. But there is a good reason they put BMI on here. So let me ask you a question. Why did that patient get sent to prep? Because their doctor said they were overweight and their BMI was too high, right? Now they come in to you, a personal trainer, and you say, BMI doesn't matter, weight doesn't matter, those are horrible metrics. Who are they going to believe? Their doctor or their certified personal trainer? Yeah. This is on there to demonstrate to them just how bad BMI is. And here's what I mean by that. What can every person who comes into this club and trains with you guys relate to? What happens to their face if you say, you are losing body fat mass? That's a hallelujah moment, okay? That overrides a doctor, that overrides a congressman, that overrides God. You show them that they are losing body fat, and you have hooked them. Now, if you can show them that they're losing body fat and their BMI isn't changing, you've convinced them. BMI is not a great metric, okay? So, one of the key metrics we talk about is percent body fat. And we're going to talk about that more in a minute, but I really wanted to emphasize why we put BMI on here. So it is a much, much better indicator of health risk and obesity than BMI because it takes into account muscularity by eliminating it. So this is a good time to say, why BMI, right? Healthcare may not do fitness well, but they're not stupid people, right? So if BMI and weight are so bad, why do we use them? Well, the answer is simple. BMI is actually a population level metric. When the Center for Disease Control does population studies and looks at things, BMI, when you get to those ends, actually is an effective tool. Okay? So who was the first group to do population studies? Public health. So the insurance world, which is an actuarial world, is not going to reinvent the wheel. So where do they go to get their data and statistics? Public health. What metric is measured? BMI. What does insurance use? BMI. Who reimburses healthcare? Insurance. I have to write down a BMI on every patient who walks in my office or I do not get reimbursed according to the Affordable Care Act. I don't meet the meaningful use criteria. It's a metric we have to use in order to get reimbursed. That's why it is used in healthcare. Okay? All right, so percent body fat. I bring this up because you're going to look at some numbers on this and look at what are normal ranges, and if you do any outside reading, you're going to go, what? Because the normal ranges for percent body fat are all over the board. You look at what's acceptable range in the military, you look at what's acceptable range here on the Inbody. Most people use as the standard the World Health Organization range, which for men is 18 to 25% is considered normal. For women, it's 18 to 28%. Now, what you will find is most other organizations that create normal ranges will have a wider range for women than this. The range for women will normally deviate more than it does for the World Health Organization. Now, when you look at the in-body healthy range, for men it's 10 to 20%, and for women it's 18 to 28. Well, why so different? Why is that radically different? So, if any of you, you're young enough, you probably don't go to your doctors regularly, but when you get your labs drawn, okay, and they look at your blood work, you're going to see normal ranges. And if you look at the normal range for LabCorp's complete blood count, and you look at the normal range for VCU's labs normal blood count, and the normal range for UVA's CBC normal blood count, they're different. Well, that doesn't make any sense. It does. Every lab with its machines has to run a sample size of a certain number to create its statistical validity. And that's how they create their normal ranges, because all the machines are a little different. Inbody ran their, whatever that N was, that created its statistical validity, and this is what came out as the norm. Okay? Now let's talk about percent of essential fat. You need fat. Your brain does not function without fat. Your peripheral nervous system does not function without fat. Your neuroendocrine system does not function without fat. If you are a female in childbearing years, without fat, you will become amenorrheic and you will lose bone density. It's the classic female athlete disease, okay? So there is a critical percentage of fat that you need. And if you see on this Inbody, everybody wants to get that fat down as low as they can. You do an Inbody scan and you see numbers below what I'm going to show you, that warrants intervention within the scope of your practice. Okay? You don't tell them much of anything except this number is concerning and it's something you should probably discuss with a registered dietitian or your physician. But it's a red flag. In men, it's 4 to 6%. In women, it's 10 to 13%. And most women, particularly female athletes, don't like that number. They want it down. They want it below that. And if they get below that, they're going to have health issues. All right, so segmental lean analysis. This is where we start to break down the symmetry of the body. Okay? We start going side to side. So this defines symmetry and muscle balance. And it can help clarify areas of either injury or imbalance where you need to either focus your training or be aware of the potential for injury when you are training. This does not define specifically the skeletal muscle mass in each section. And actually that's a good thing because again, what we also want to know about is the extracellular water because that's an indicator for us of a problem. Because this tracks body water as well as the muscle. And it can help quantify and localize injury or inflammation. So when you look at it, we look at 5 segments, 2 arms, 2 legs, and the trunk. Again, the top bar is pounds, lean body mass in pounds, and it compares against the average expected for height. So again, it's a body norm that's height adjusted. Now here's the key here, folks. Remember I mentioned the 100% earlier. These should be at 100% or higher. When you look at the bottom bar, that's lean body mass as a percentage. And it compares it against body weight. And this is critical. Okay? Each segment should be at 100% or greater, or you have a situation. And what's that situation? That situation is you have a person who is really not truly capable of handling their own body weight. You have a person who is at fall risk. You have a person who is not going to be really capable, for instance, of using crutches or a walker well. You have a person who is not going to transfer well if they have a lower extremity injury. But more importantly, and this is going to come as a shock to people in this room because we make our living working out our glutes, whereas the rest of the world makes their living sitting on them. But a significant percentage of the population has lower extremity segments that when you measure them don't get 100%. These are people who literally are not really able to handle their own body weight well. And that's why I fix hip fractures every week. So when we talk about underdeveloped body segments, really common in sedentary adults, okay? You know, make your living sitting at a computer on a keyboard. So the lower extremity segments are often below 100% due to prolonged sitting. We also see this in skinny fat individuals. Remember I told you if you push that I down low or if you push that C down low, you don't have a morphologically obese person, but you have a skinny fat person who can't handle their own weight. Elderly. So men, here's your bad news for today. You hear all the time about women losing bone density as they age, right? They get osteoporotic. You have the equivalent. It's called sarcopenia of aging. Starting around age 50 to 55, you start to lose lean body mass, lean muscle. Okay? You start to lose skeletal muscle the way women lose bone. There's only one thing that has been shown to delay or arrest that loss, and that is resistance training. There are good studies to also show that creatine can help in conjunction with resistance training, but it is your nemesis, the way bone density loss is in women. Now, women, I wish I could give you great news, but you get it as well, just not as rapidly and as severely as men. So, they start to waste away a little bit. They get older, their vestibular system is not as good, so their balance is not as good, so they start decreasing activities. Now, fortunately, we are entering an era where we're seeing more and more of the boomers start coming to us, okay, and we're driving them here. But in general, in the elderly population, this is what you see, and this starts the downward spiral. Lean body mass is less than 100% because of muscle loss and therefore a high fat to muscle ratio. So let's look at side-to-side imbalances, okay? A side-to-side imbalance, depending on whether it's extracellular water or whether it's muscle mass, can be an indicator of an old injury with atrophy. You know, you have somebody who had a long-standing L5-S1 disc and they've atrophied that lower extremity. You have somebody who had a open fracture that was fixed and they've lost muscle mass in that area. So that can be an indicator of an old injury with atrophy. It can be an indicator based on what the extracellular water is of acute or subacute injury with swelling. So again, remember, when you look at the extracellular water, then immediately go to the segmental analysis and say, is this symmetric, which is more disease state or medication, or is this asymmetric, which is injury? Now, it can also indicate pathologic dominance. And again, this room is too young to remember. In the 1970s, there was a tennis player, Guillermo Villas. Guillermo Villas was in the top 5 throughout the 70s. Now, remember, in the 70s, when I was playing most of my tennis, Prince hadn't yet created the oversized racket, and we weren't using composites. They were wooden rackets with a regular head that had a sweet spot the size of a nickel. And those wooden rackets weighed between 18 and 23 ounces. Now, Guillermo Villas once had a journalist ask him if he had had polio as a child. I met him in an elevator and shook his right hand. He was a left-hander, which looked like it had polio, and his forearm was bigger than mine. It's just that his left forearm looked like somebody's thigh, because 10 hours a day he swung a 23-ounce racket. Now, that's pathologic dominance. Okay? That is someone who has normal muscle mass on their bad side and excessive muscle mass on their, quote, good side. Now, if you are top 5 in the world tennis player, that pathologic dominance is beneficial. For most of the rest of the world, that type of pathologic dominance is just that. It is pathologic. It's a problem. It creates imbalances, and it can create secondary compensatory injury. So again, for you, that's a training guide. That tells you how you need to focus. This is someone who's doing dumbbell work, not barbell work. This is someone who's training unilaterally rather than bilaterally. So it's a good guide for your training. Now, I told you there would be a second slide that you had to wake up for. Wake up for this one. It's very simple. Takes about a minute, and then you'll be done, but remember it. We talked earlier about visceral fat versus subcutaneous fat. This measurement on the Inbody is very important for you helping somebody define their health, okay? This is the harmful fat around your organs, and in this slide it says 100 square centimeters is the cutoff. With the Inbodies we're using, that number is 10, but just think of 10 squared as the 100, okay? It depends on which of the models you use, whether it's 10 or 100. But it's simple. That's the cutoff. If it's below that, it's good. If it's above that, it is bad. And if it is above that, you need to train to that. You need to get rid of visceral fat. Now, some of you may have seen the one recent study that showed that resistance training may be as effective at reducing visceral fat as cardio, but that's against a room full of literature which would support that cardio is better at eliminating this. And folks, this is not HIIT training for 20 minutes. This is getting your people to do 10 to 15,000 steps a day. Visceral fat responds to prolonged low levels of exercise, okay? So this is the fat that is most influenced by cardio. Although, again, keep your eye out because there's some recent literature that questions that a little bit. Never believe the first study, though. But this is why the pear shape is better than the barrel shape. So body fat, lean mass control. So this slide. When you look at this slide, you're going to see pluses and minuses. Okay? It's going to tell you this is what you need to lose or gain to get to your goal. Okay? You need to gain X amount of muscle mass or lose X amount of body fat to get to the goal. Well, understand that these numbers theoretically achieve ideal body composition. Now let's talk about ideal body composition. Life is made up of bell curves. Okay? Everything in life is a bell curve. You have people on the power end of the curve, you have the masses in the middle of the curve, and then you have the people on the bad end of the bell curve. Ideal body composition is right at the peak of the bell. Okay? So let me ask you a question. Who in this room, in almost anything in life, if I said to you, do you want to be in the middle of the bell curve, what would your answer be? Yeah, you don't want to be Joe average. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing to be, but if I'm asking you, what's your goal? You're not going to say, I want to be dead in the middle of the pack. That's my goal. It's not. Now, it's not for you. But if I'm starting out at the back of the pack, absolutely. The middle pack looks pretty darn good. Okay? So how you use these numbers, again, depends on where they are in that spectrum. You have somebody who comes in and they look at you and go, ha, this thing says I'm dead on. Your answer is you're dead on Joe average. Now let me tell you what I can do to make you a lot better. Now you have someone who comes in and it says, you've got to lose 18, in fat. That's a person where you're shooting for the middle of that bell curve. But my point to you is you'll have some clients who will look at this and say, this says I'm right on it. And you look them dead in the eye and say, you are absolutely dead on average. Congratulations. Now will you let me help you? Okay? So that's how you have to think of this in terms of how you develop your training. All right, segmental fat analysis. Let's talk about this one. Because this is one you're going to try and avoid and your clients are going to glom onto. Okay? And in particular, you're going to get the guy who's got flabby thighs or butt or the woman who's got the flabby triceps. And what they want you to do is to spot reduce that fat. That's where I want you to focus. Look at this analysis. It says my arms are problems. So here's the thing, folks. You can spot target muscle. You cannot spot target fat. If they want to spot target fat, tell them to go out and spend a lot of money on cool sculpting, and it won't work. And then they can go spend a lot of money on other types of cryotherapy, and it won't work. And then they can spend a lot of money on liposuction, because liposuction is the only thing on the face of this planet which effectively targets spot fat areas. So tell them to ignore this section. If they're not happy with the fat in their arms, they need to lose fat, period. All over. Okay? This, if I was going to have you wake up for a third one, it would be this. So if you want to wake up, wake up. Basal metabolic rate. This is a problem number, particularly in the population that wants to lose weight. Okay? So BMR is the number of calories required for basic bodily functions. It allows you to sit, it allows you to pee and defecate and think as long as you don't strain your brain. But that's all BMR does. Okay? It is not a goal. It is not a target number for caloric intake. Okay? It is not what they should eat in a day. And people who want to lose weight target that number. And what they don't realize is it is counterproductive. If you take in too few calories on a consistent basis, your body goes into what's called a starvation mode. That's how people survive for years in a POW camp. Your metabolic rate will go to that of a sleeping sloth if it has to survive, but it means you won't lose weight. Okay? So when you have people who are coming in and training to improve their health and their condition, they need to eat to that training level. So you need to talk to them about this is how you're going to track your calories burned. Your basal metabolic rate is what you start with. This is what you're going to burn, and this is where we're going to put you in order to lose weight in an appropriate fashion. So it is absolutely that. It is the most basic amount of calories required for life. It is not what they should shoot for. Okay? So, Inbody is an imperfect but really excellent and useful tool. It's not the best for research purposes, but for what we are doing, training our people and giving them the data they need with regard to their health and with regard to how we're going to train them, it's very, very effective. It is reasonably priced, small footprint in the club, no disrobing or swimsuits, no submersion. It's not personally invasive or embarrassing. But here's what I want you to remember, folks. Two things. Data is only as good as what you do with it. Okay? Inbody is a cool tool. But if all it does is tell somebody this is where you are, it does you no good, because guess what? I'm going to give you an incredible secret. They knew where they were. Okay? If they're skinny, they know they're skinny. If they're fat, they know they're fat. The only ones who might not know where they are skinny fats. Okay? So unless you're going to take that data and create a plan and help them implement that plan, this is a useless tool. The other thing to remember is that a single data point is helpful but not tremendously useful. A single data point will help tell them where they are, but again, folks, Most of them know where they are, and you guys are professionals. You can assess them and know where they are. So a single data point can help you shock them into reality. It can give them metrics that they can train to, which is good. But the reality is this only is an effective tool if you can show them where they've been and where they are and where they want to go. So it is multiple data points that is critical with this tool. Now, that leads us to the first question that always gets asked, so I'll just head it off, okay? And the question always comes up, how often should we do it? When should we do it? And I'm going to give you two answers, okay? I'm going to give you a scientific answer, and then I'm going to give you a real-life answer, okay? The scientific answer is this. If I were to ask you guys, how long, if you have somebody who's training well and doing what you ask them to, and you map out a good program, how long is it going to take them to see significant changes biologically in their body composition and their weight?
2-3 months.
Okay, at the 60 to 90 days, those are the answers I'll usually get. And 90 is better, but 60 is reasonable, right? Depending on where they are when they start. The further they are from the midline, the better they're going to look at 60 days. The closer they are to the midline, the more you might want to wait 90. So as a general rule, what I tell people is, in the perfect world, probably about every 3 months. Okay? But the real world is this. You use this tool as a device to motivate and retain people. Okay? I have a prepper who comes in, and they're working hard. I know they're working hard. I see them every day. And I know that they are making gains. But they are going home every day, stepping on the scale, looking at themselves in the mirror, and they are totally depressed because they were convinced this 60 days would change their lives, and it hasn't. I'm going to lose that person. What I've got to do is show them something that demonstrates their effort is helping. So I'm going to do an Inbody. If I have to do it at 30 days, 45 days, whatever. Because the worst that happens is there isn't a significant change, and I'll try and spin that as best I can, but I was losing them anyway. The best that happens is they go, oh wow, my percent body fat is down and that BMI thing sucks. Okay, I'm going to stick this out. The same is true for you with your personal training clients. Get outside my prep area and go to your personal training clients. You all have people who you've trained who you suddenly realize you're losing, right? You just sense that they're starting to get frustrated, they're starting to get stale, they don't feel like they're making the progress, and you know you're going to lose them. If you have a baseline Inbody on them, I'd throw them on the Inbody. I don't care when it is. Because again, the worst that happens is nothing, and you lose them anyway, but you knew you were going to lose them. The best that happens is you show them that they are making changes, or you can show them with this change in the scale, if we flip your training up just a little bit, it gives you a marker to let you say, hey, let's refresh. So the reality is, when it comes to that kind of situation, I'd use it whenever you feel like you need it to reinvigorate or remotivate somebody that you feel like you're using. But in a perfect world, 60 to 90 days, preferably 90. Okay? A couple more questions that often come up or have come up fairly consistently. What about breast implants? Breast implants are read as water because that's generally their density. If you go to their website, they actually have a chart that tells you based on the number of cc's in the implant, how to factor that in, and women know how many cc's they have in their implants. Orthopedic hardware, another question that comes up. Somebody has a total hip, or they have plates in their leg or rods in their back. So the reality is those implants do affect the electrical impedance, but they do it consistently. So what you tell folks is this: we're going to get a baseline number. That baseline number may not be perfect. It may not match what you get in the bod pod or dunking, but it's our baseline. And what we're going to look at is where you're going to go from here. This data point only helps us in terms of mapping out your journey. And those impedance differences will be consistent. So when you see gains in muscle mass, you're seeing gains in muscle mass. Okay? The other one that has come up is prosthetics. Someone has a below knee amputation or an above knee amputation. So interestingly, that gets much more complex because it depends on what the implant is made out of, what level it is. So in general, you do one of two things. you either have them stand on one foot, at which they are all adept, unless they're my diabetic preppers, in which case you don't have them stand on one foot. If you have them stand on one foot, you just eliminate the side-to-side analysis on that lower extremity. And again, you tell them this is your baseline, and we're using it as a trend. But you can do the same thing with the prosthetic on, okay? You essentially just tell them, the thing about it is it's going to make it look like they have a little more muscle and a little more mineral than they have. But again, use it as your baseline data point, and then just really look at the trends as you move forward. And then the last thing that comes up is pacemakers. Do not put a person with a pacemaker on this machine. What will happen if you do? Absolutely nothing, believe it or not. Pacemakers are sturdier than they are touted to be. But the reality is there is that 1 in a million chance that it could impact their pacemaker and their rhythm. More significantly, you put them on the Inbody at 10 o'clock and they're sipping a smoothie at 11, somewhere else, and their pacemaker goes aberrant, it becomes your fault. So don't panic if you have ever put somebody on one and they tell you, oh, by the way, I have a pacemaker. You tell them we're going to call your doctor, and they'll run an EKG pattern and everything will be fine. You don't need to call 911 unless they start clutching their chest. But one of the questions you ask everybody before you put them on the machine is, do you have a pacemaker? And if they do, don't do it. Okay? It's a lot to throw at you.
Yeah.
A lot to absorb. So Kristen or your directors can send you out these slides so that you have them. More importantly, we now have our videographer, so you will be able to listen to this spiel like Kristen has until she's ready to vomit it.
I dream about it.
Yeah. But it really is. It's a very powerful tool, and it takes a while of doing it. But you'll get to the point, in Germantown, that group that did it all the time, to sort of prove my mettle to them, I just said, okay, give me your sheets. Pick your clients and give me your sheets. And I basically told them, this is what they look like, this is what they do, this is how they're training. And it hammered home the point that this really, once you get used to the subtleties of it, this is an incredibly powerful tool for you as a trainer. I personally believe we should be doing it on everybody. Let me come back to your question. Inbody will sync Inbody no matter when it was done or how it was done. It will not sync in the software other devices. They can be manually input into the Weld software platform that we have, but they will not automatically sync. Okay?
You can't put them in manually.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need a separate code or?
So the person you would talk to, John Moriarty, would just have to add a data chart for you. You would tell him what metrics you're putting in there, and then you can enter it.
If BMR is so important to stay at or above, why am I seeing so many prescriptions for 800-calorie diets from physicians?
So there are times to use it. There are legitimate metabolic times to use it when you're actually shocking a system. But that is way, way outside your scope of practice. Okay? I mean, and if you're seeing that from a physician, vast majority of time it should either be an endocrinologist or a primary care who does an awful lot of obesity and diabetes work. Now, when you talk about a bariatric population, they have mechanisms built in. They don't go into starvation mode. You could feed them nothing for weeks, and they will survive, and their body won't shut down into a starvation mode. So different populations, nothing is true always in life. So the BMR is not 100% true, but quite frankly, for our population, it's going to be true 99.9% of the time. Okay?